कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पत आनश्वन्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनं श्रीमहागणाधिपतये नमः। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् आचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। एभिस्त्रिवर्णैः पर्यस्तैः बुद्धिभेदैः क्रियोद्भवैः स्वरूपमात्मनो बुध्येत गन्धैर्वायुमिवान्वयात्। So using these three states, you can understand the Atma with the help of these three states. There is this understanding is of a very unique way. It is like, as I was saying yesterday, as long as you are attached to the name and form, name and shape, nama rupa, you will remain ignorant of the reality. Because the name and shape, your attachment to the name and shape acts like a shield. And so the reality remains covered up. But even while seeing the name and form, you see through the name and form. There is a way of seeing a name and form and seeing through the name and form. So, if you see only the name and form, you will not be able to see through the name and form. So, means you are able to transcend the name and form even while you are aware of the name and form. Then you are in a communion with the reality. So, that is how it works. Therefore, in the waking state, what you have to notice is you are the awareness of the waking state. Not all that appears in the waking state, you are not. Whatever that appears in the waking state, whatever personality that you have created for yourself with the help of the mind in the waking state, you are not that. And the world which shines in the waking state is not real. Then what is the reality of this waking state? The awareness in which the waking state shines. Similarly, the dream, similarly, the sleep state. This point which we were discussing in good detail yesterday. Therefore, these are the three gunas, three varnaihi, varna is the guna here, and buddhi bhedaihi. These are the three states which are nothing but different modifications of the same mind. Buddheha bhedaha. So mind alone modifies in one state, in one modification you have the waking state, etc. And kriyodbhavaihi. And these three states are the origin of actions, like the waking state. So there is a world, and then in that world you are a part. You are a person, part of that world. And so you take yourself to be a body mind, and in the process you become a doer and enjoyer, and therefore so perform actions which are all in the waking state alone, which are all part of the waking state alone. Therefore, these three gunas, giving rise to these three states, which are nothing but the modifications of the same mind, are the origin of all actions. Kriyodbhavaihi. And the underlying reality is the Atma, the awareness, and that you can appreciate only by rejecting these three gunas and these three states. They are ever changing and therefore they are unreal. The reality is the pure awareness that underlies these three states. This is how you have to understand your own Swarupa. Swarupa Matmano Buddhyet. So I have said enough about the three states and that Avasthatraya Prakriya. So I think I will make a conclusion of that small topic within the entire thing. We will see next verse also. Etadvaro hi samsaraha gunakarma nibandhanaha Ajnanamuloparthopi Pumsasvapna iveshyate. So the samsara, the samsara is the bondage. The bondage that we experience in life. So this bondage also I have described how it is there in our lives. So in one sentence, the bondage is there is an insecurity and an unhappiness and unsatisfactoriness in our lives, in spite of securing so many things, in spite of accumulating a lot of wealth, lot of pleasure objects and various pleasures we accumulate, and then we create a setup of family, etc. For ourselves. So what all we can do in the life, we do it, and yet remain insecure and unhappy, and quite often very conflicted in life. That is the samsara. Very briefly I told what is samsara. And this samsara is caused by these three gunas, etadvaraha, and the three states that these gunas give rise to. So, guna karma nibandhanaha. The samsara is indeed very much put in place by the gunas, sattva-rajastamo gunas, corresponding to the three states, a sattva state corresponding to the waking state, sattva guna, the dream state corresponding to the rajoguna, and sleep, tamoguna. So these three gunas, and then what all actions that are there as part of the waking state, the karmas. So these gunas and karmas, as you identify with these gunas, suppose you identify with the personality of the waking state, you are identifying with the gunas, and then you identify with the karmas as the doer and enjoyer. This is how the samsara is put in place. And this samsara has its origin in ignorance, ajnana mulaha. You see, there is this ajnana, ignorance in the people's lives, that which causes the insecurity and unhappiness to the human being, in spite of acquiring all the things of the world. The human being remains insecure and unhappy because of this ajnana, and the samsara caused by ajnana mulaha. You see, very interestingly, whatever happens due to ignorance, it does not really happen. अज्ञान से जो होता है वो असल में नहीं होता है. So, for example, you see a serpent. There is no serpent, it is the rope. And you see a serpent due to ignorance. And the serpent is not really there. Suppose you see the serpent and the serpent is really there. That is not ajnana. So you see the serpent and the serpent is absent. That is ajnana. Therefore, this samsara has its origin in ignorance, in ajnana. That means the samsara is not really there. Yet pumsaha swapna iva ishyate. Suppose the human being is still bound by the samsara. Means what? The samsara that binds us has its origin in ignorance, and hence the samsara is not real. That means what? We are bound by a non-existent or unreal samsara. Can you believe it? You say, suppose you are afraid. You are afraid of something. All fear has its origin in ignorance. And therefore, whatever you are afraid of doesn't exist. Suppose you are afraid of some spirit. In the night time you see some shadow, and now you believe that the shadow is a spirit, and now you are afraid of the spirit. Now, what is the cause of your fear? The spirit. Now, does the spirit exist? It doesn't exist. Now you are dreaming. The dream becomes a nightmare. So the person is terrified of the things that he experiences in the dream, and they cause intense pain and suffering to the person. That is what is called nightmare. But then the dream is not real. Similarly, in the waking state, whatever experience is making you suffer, whatever it is, You think it is real. If you understand carefully, it is not real. That means what? You are unnecessarily suffering. If you know correctly, there is no suffering. Suppose you have fear. You first understand that this fear is caused by ignorance. That means there is no real reason for fear, and yet you are afraid. Like for example, parents are ever insecure about their children. Ever insecure. That something is going to happen to their children. Now, what is it that makes them unhappy and insecure about children? Not the actual situation of the children. Actual situation of the children is quite okay. They are doing fine. They may have some difficulties and all that, but there is no reason for the parents to be afraid. Yet the parents are afraid. And when the parents have the fear, they think that the fear is caused by the actual situation of their children. It is not caused by the actual situation. It is caused by their own ignorance. So they imagine that my son or my daughter doesn't have a bright future, or some problem is there. Like that they imagine, and therefore they are afraid, or they are worried. It is their imagination that causes them suffering. It is not the actual. The person is doing fine. More often than not, the person that you are worried about is doing fine. In fact, he is not worried about himself on the point where you are worried. For example, we are worried whether he will pass in first class or not. What is the fun of you and me worrying? He should worry. And he doesn't worry. And he may pass in first class also. And suppose he doesn't pass in first class, okay, he will pass in second class. Everybody need not pass in first class. Why everybody should pass in first class? There is a thing called second class, only because everybody doesn't pass in first class. And there are people in that also. Why not our boy? Is okay. And in life, happiness doesn't depend upon first class or second class. So you imagine a few things and become worried. Therefore, whenever you have worry, it is caused by a cause that is imagined by you, not real. So this fact you should know. For example, attachment. You think that you are attached, and therefore you are attached. Stop thinking that you are attached, you are not attached anymore. It is that simple. The attachment is like that. Suppose you think that you are unable to overcome desire. Desire is bad, but I am unable to overcome. You try. You take one desire which you have, you take up that and examine it and throw it aside. Ignore it, it will go away. Take one fear and drop it, it will go away. But if you say it is difficult, then it is difficult. If you say I am bound, then you are bound. If you say I am afraid, then you are afraid. If you say I am worried, then you are worried. If you say I am not worried, you are not worried. Try it. That is how it works. The samsara is like that. It is there when you believe it is there. If it is not there, when you see the truth of yourself and when you see the unreal nature of the world, then there is no sorrow anymore. So that is how the third verse is. Tasmat bhavadbhih kartavyam karmanam trigunatmanam bija nirharanam yogaha pravaho paramo dhiyaha. This Prahlada is a jnani bhakta. Therefore his teaching, his upadesha, it corresponds to the jnanam of the highest order. Therefore he says, you have to do this. Bhavadbhihi kartavyam. What? Bija nirharanam. You see, suppose you are given a few seeds. The grain seeds will be there, bija, seeds. Now a person is given seeds. And now what he did, the seeds, instead of putting them in the soil, they will sprout and then it becomes a field, then you have to harvest the crop, this and that, and you gain so much of it. So there is a process for it. Now this guy, what he did, he took these seeds and he has roasted them and had added some spice to it and he ate it. That is what is called bija niraharanam. So that you have to do that, kartavyam. So trigunatmanam karmanam bija. You see, suppose you have a desire. This desire, it puts you on a course of action. And then one action leads to another action. Therefore, a single desire can put you on a chain of actions. And then you have fear. That will put you on a different set of actions. And so this is how the desire, the fear, they are the bija, the seed for all kinds of actions. Then you may wonder, what is wrong with actions? You see, actions bind people. There is samsara, there is bondage. This bondage is put in place by the actions that we perform. There is a way of performing an action whereby the action, the karma doesn't bind you. Yajnarthat karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. The human being is in the bondage of karma. And except those karmas which are performed with a sense of surrender to Ishvara, yajna. So Parameshwararpana vastu. So by surrendering the karma to Ishvara, so by disregarding the result thereof, by surrendering the result to Ishvara, by surrendering the action to Ishvara, if you perform an action, that won't bind. In fact, that will liberate you. That is called karma yoga. Except such actions which are performed as yoga, every other action which has its origin in the desire and fear, etc., which are born of ignorance in their turn, so long those actions will bind you. Therefore, what you have to do, these actions, karmanam, and the actions are in the form of guna. You see, an action is performed by the body and by the organs of action and by the mind. The mind resolves to perform an action. So the mind is sattva guna. The organs of action, they engage in the performance of the action, and that is the rajoguna. And of course, the physical body is part of the action. So that is the tamoguna. Therefore, trigunatmanam, every action is arising out of these three gunas. And Atma is nirguna. It is not one with the gunas unless you identify with the gunas in ignorance. You see, you are listening to Prahlada's teaching of Vedanta, so please have an open mind. And please be prepared for some serious discussion of Vedanta. That is the verse there. I cannot make it entertaining to you. So you please be prepared for some such discussion. So I hope you understand what I am trying to say. Therefore, these actions have their origin in these three gunas. So the gunas together put the action in place, and then the bija of action, the seed of every action, is the kamaha, the desire, and then the fear arising out of desires. When there is a desire, there will be fear. Without desire, you will not have any fear. So this is how the actions are arising. So now what you do, you put an end to this bija, karma bija. So the sankalpa, the thought, which is the origin of action, which generates action, you put an end to it. That means you do not desire anything. Thereby, all actions that are born out of desire are given up. And so you are free from the bondage of actions. Then how life goes on? Life goes on very smoothly. Desires won't give life. Desires only disrupt life. Therefore, so one person was asked, one Mahatma was asked this question, without desires how can we live? Areyappa, you got it all wrong. To live happily, you need food and you need clothes and you need a roof on your head. That is all you need for living. You don't need desires to live. In fact, in spite of having nice food and good clothing and a nice home to live in, the people suffer because of desires. Therefore, the bija niraharanam has to be done. And this is called yoga. That is the yoga in life. And now, how to live this yoga, how to put this yoga into practice. So, he says, Prahlada says, this yoga, you have to make it happen in your life by meditation. He is recommending meditation. Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. This is the jnana prakaranam, the context of the jnanam, Here, the meditation becomes very important. And therefore, so to overcome the bondage of Namarupa, that is what we have discussed, and to overcome the identification with the gunas, namely what you identify with the body, that is identification with tamoguna, you identify with actions as karta bhokta, as karta, that is identification with rajoguna, and you identify with the bhoga as the bhokta, that is identification with the sattva guna. So this is guna identification, which is the bondage due to ignorance, and then the karmas bind us, that is the karmas, and the karmas have their origin in desires, etc., which is again ignorance. So how to solve this puzzle? That is the question. How to solve it? Yoga. So you live a life of yoga. And yoga is communion with the truth. That is what yoga is. Yoga is combination or coming together. So the seeker, the striver, the sadhaka comes to face with the truth. And so that is, he is suggesting meditation. Tell you a shloka from Gita. You see, like Atma samstham kinchidapi chintayet. From Gita, it is in the 6th chapter of Gita. Above this, Nairoparamet samstham mana. A word India so identified, hold back, not be able to do it all, to move in the right direction. We sit in Vedanta evening and the rest of the time we go. You undo whatever little Vedanta class, you undo it immediately. 2 steps forward, 3 steps backward, like that. So, if you study Vedanta, the samsara pravrutti, this is not a path of pravrutti, this is the path of nivrutti. So here you do not undertake a project that takes you deeper into the world. That is not what you do here. Here you do exactly the opposite. Step by step, slowly and slowly, shanai shanaihi, you make an effort to hold back, to withdraw from the samsara. So Shanai Shanai Ruparamet. For that you need a mind, a buddhi, an understanding, together with dhriti, a courage. Withdrawal from the samsara, you need courage. And with that courage, you withdraw from the samsara. You see, I am not suggesting, having said this much, let me say this also. I am not suggesting that you should not practice an honest profession. I am not saying that. If you are, you have to, you be engaged in an honest profession, and then don't be greedy. And whatever required from the world, you have to take it, you have to make a little money, please do that by all means. But then you have to strike a balance to see that you remain a family person. That also need not change. You continue to be a grihastha doing a job, that need not change. But you should not be a worldly person. You should be a dutiful person, a loving person, but not an ambitious, competitive, worldly person. You should not be. That is what I am saying. So please don't misunderstand me. So Shanai Shanai Ruparamet. This is told by Sri Krishna to Arjuna. Sri Krishna happens to be a family person. Arjuna is also a family person. In fact, they had multiple wives also. But still the Upadesha is in place. Therefore, this is not exclusively meant for sannyasis, so it is good for sannyasis also. So, Shanai Shanai Uparamet Buddhya Dhriti Grihitaya. So, when you withdraw the buddhi, the mind from the world, then what will happen to the mind? It will resolve in its source. Atma samstham manah kritva. You make the mind resolved in its source, which is the awareness pure. Na kinchidapi chintayed. Abide in a thoughtless state. Just be without the flow of thoughts for a change. The whole day you are spending in the flow of thoughts to go to the office, to do the work there, to make money, and then to take care of the needs of the family. You need to employ the mind, which you should do. Without mind, I cannot speak, I cannot go to the room, and I cannot come from the room without mind. I need mind to use the mind. But then I have to use the mind. The mind should not use me. Therefore, Atma Samstham Manah Kritva. As a practice, both morning and evening in meditation, you see that the mind resolves in its source. Now, if you allow the mind to wander in the world, from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other, when will you allow it to resolve in your in the source? You keep a cell phone by your side and sit in meditation. How long you will be able to keep that mind resolved in its source? It will ring immediately, and so you look at it, and Atma Samstham Manakritva, and look at it, and so somebody who his mind doesn't allow him to sit quiet. And so he telephones to you for no reason, and therefore you look at it and you answer to him. And so his mind is one monkey and your mind is another monkey. Both monkeys are dealing with the two cell phones. What kind of thing it is? Therefore throw the cell phone away and sit in meditation and allow the mind to resolve in its source. Na kinchidapi chintayed. Don't think of any worldly things. In fact, don't think of anything. Remain thoughtless. So, what is thoughtless state? So he says, Yogaha pravaho paramo dhiyaha. That is what Prahlada says. Same. What Sri Krishna says in Gita, the same thing he is saying. So, yoga, the sadhana, it consists of putting an end to pravaha, the flow of the mind. Dhiyaha pravaha uparamaha. So, he is recommending that you have to meditate. By meditating, you will be able to withdraw from the world. And then when you start, you see, I will tell you, you have to listen to this discussion will be on this type only. You have to listen to it with an open mind. You will. I will tell you a principle which is told by Sri Ramakrishna. You will not know the world by being in the world. You will know the world by coming out of the world. So, to know that the world is just names and forms alone, it is not real. To know that, if you are part of the world, if you engage with the world, if you are involved with it with all your enthusiasm, if you identify with the world, you will not know that. You will know the real nature of the world only when you step back. When you are part of it, you will not know it. Therefore, you step back from the world. How to do that? Mind. You hold back the mind. Pravaho paramodhiyaha. So, let the flow of the mind come to an end. Do meditation. Today morning that was the meditation what we are trying to do. And we will continue to make meditate in that direction tomorrow also. So, you see, you are familiar with the world. You think you are familiar with the world. How do you become familiar with the world? By going into the world through the mind and the sense organs. Sense organs are the path and mind is the instrument. So you go into the world with the mind, and that is how you try to become familiar with the world. But then in you there is the mind which is ever changeful. In you there is the body, and then in you there is the mind which is ever changeful. So the body and the mind are the ever changeful, and this is what I was saying in yesterday's class. Underlying the changeful body and the mind is the changeless awareness which is Atma. Now you have to know yourself. So if you have to know Atma, so what you have to do? You have to visit yourself. You have to go within and you will find Atma. So while going within, first you encounter body. As you are, instead of looking at the world, stop looking at the world and look at yourself. First of all, you encounter the body. And then go deeper, you encounter the mind. And then let the mind remain quiet. Then you will encounter yourself, the awareness pure, the awareful being. That is what you encounter. That is the Atma. It is now and it is here. It's not that Atma will come to you sometime later, or Atma will come to you if you go to India. It will not come to you by going to India. It is you, now and here. Therefore, this kind of meditation you have to do. So by doing this meditation in the form of abiding in the thoughtless state of one's own true self, you become familiar with yourself. So you have to cultivate that familiarity with yourself. Body. It is knowing about body is not reading a book of medicine. That is not knowing about the body. You may read a book of medicine, you may read the entire anatomy, but still you don't know the body. Really you do not know the body. That knowledge may help you to treat another person's body, but still you remain ignorant of your own body. Even a medical man, he doesn't know his body. And what all knowledge he has is about the other bodies. That's why if he gets some stomach pain, he runs to another doctor. So you have to know your body. And how will you know the body? Not by reading a book on medicine. That way you will not know your body. You will get some information. I am not saying you will not know it at all. You get it as second-hand knowledge. What the book says about the body, that only you know. That is not the direct knowledge. That is very indirect knowledge about the body. The direct knowledge about body you can have, you should have. By what? By watching the body, by meditation. So you become familiar with your body. Suppose you have some small back pain. You do meditation and watch the body and its movement in meditation, That is what meditation is. You watch the body and its movement, and in the process you become familiar with the body. Then you will realize that this back pain, etc., is not a significant thing. And as you start watching it, it will go away. Suppose you don't do that, you run to a doctor, a medical man. He will recommend a MRI and CAT scan. So nowadays, you see, for the medical community, the first thing they do is a CAT scan and MRI. The very first thing. You go to a doctor with, if suppose you get a headache, don't go to a doctor. He will recommend CAT scan. You don't want a CAT scan for a headache. You just quietly take an aspirin tablet and be quiet. It will go away. He will do CAT scan because otherwise he is worried whether you will sue him later. Therefore he will. So you are putting yourself in a very, very undesirable situation. So first of all, you should know your body. You should become familiar with your body. This body. You are not the body. Body is the other. And you watch it. You become familiar with it. It will help you a lot. Even to remain healthy and to deal with illness and to deal with the problems of the old age, you need to understand your body. Not through medical book, through direct experience. That is meditation. Inner familiarity. Then mind. You encounter your mind. You should know the movement of your mind, how your mind is moving. You should know. You will know it when you meditate. You watch your mind and start meditating. Try to remain silent. Mind should remain silent. It should resolve. That means silence of the mind. When you try to remain silent, then you notice that the mind remains silent for a short time and then it starts a thought. And the thought becomes a train of thoughts. So now you notice that. You become familiar with the mind's movement. Oh, this is how the mind moves. And so this is how it gets distracted. And so you become familiar with it. And then you bring it back. So now you have a kind of direct understanding of the movement of mind. And then this thought, a distracting thought, what kind of thought it is? Suppose you remember something that you have to do in the office. While doing meditation, you have remembered that. That means there is something called karmasakti, an attachment to action. It is there in the mind. Okay, we now know it. You need not do anything about it. You know it, that is enough. Because by knowing it, you conquer it. With body, by knowing it, you conquer it partially. You still need some medical help to conquer the body problem fully. But when it comes to the mind, by knowing the movement of the mind, you can conquer the mind. And so suppose the mind throws or projects a thought of fear. Now you know, this is how the mind is moving. It has an inherent nature to get worried, or worry or fear or insecurity. And so you watch it. Now you know, this is how the mind is moving. It has this habit of getting worried. This is the movement of the mind. Because worry is movement of the mind, nothing more to it. And so as you see that, you conquer that worry. What needs to be done, you will do. That is not the point here. And then finally, when the mind remains silent, you are your true self, which is the pure, aware, full being. You experience, you are there, but there are no thoughts. You are there, no thoughts. You do not see any thoughts. You are thoughtless. You can see that. Because if there is a thought, you see the thought. And when there is no thought, you now know that there are no thoughts. So you are in a thoughtless state, but you are there. Means what? You are already in communion with your true self. So atma samstham manah kritva na kinchidapi chintayed. Be silent That is the meditation. So pravaho paramo dhiyaha. So I am telling about this meditation which makes the student familiar with the inner life. The inner life. Outer life is what you do in the world, what money you make and what pleasures you enjoy in the world. That is the outer life. You are familiar with it all right, but what about the inner life? So meditation, and especially the meditation of this kind, means avoidance in a thoughtless state of the self. This will make you familiar, this will bring familiarity for you with the inner life. You see, by meditation, you will gain that space with reference to the body, with reference to the mind. You become familiar with your true self. That is the immediate effect of meditation. But ultimately, you will reach the source of all life and all consciousness. The consciousnness in which the waking consciousness in which the entire world comes to light, that consciousness has a source. And then life means you breathe, the heart pumps blood, and you walk, you talk, all these actions are there. That is what life is. And so life is the cause of all this movement. And that life, what is the source of that life? That source of life and consciousness, you reach there ultimately. That is the ultimate purpose of meditation. So you have to practice meditation of this kind. Pravaho paramo dhiyaha. Meditation has many dimensions to this. You hold on to a given thought, one thought. That is one kind of meditation. But here we are talking of the meditation in which there is no thought. That is the meditation. Pravaho paramo dhiyaha. You see, when you abide, I will give you a challenge. You think about it. You stay thoughtless. Be without any thought. Daily 5 minutes for 1 week. And then daily, for 10 days. And then daily 7 minutes for another 10 days. And then daily 10 minutes for another 10 days. And finally, daily 12 minutes for 10 days. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. Each 10 days. 40 days course. You practice meditation. Meditation means what? Nothing special, nothing superior, nothing very exotic. Very simple. You have to remain thoughtless. No thought. Means what? Silence. Silence is of two kinds. Outer silence and the inner silence. So here, pravaho paramo dhiyaha is the inner silence. So you practice that inner silence. I tell you, at the end of the 40 days, you will know, and people around you will also know, that you are not the same individual anymore. You are a different person altogether, because the practice of meditation affects the character very deeply. By ritual, your character will not be affected. You may perform 100 rituals, but you still remain the same greedy, cunning person. It won't affect the character that much, unless he really looks at the issue and makes the karma in the form of a yoga, etc. Whereas meditation affects the character very deeply. And then in meditation you discover the weakness of your mind. If any vice is there in the mind, you will discover that. You will discover the weakness of your mind. And the very knowing of the weakness of the mind helps you to overcome that weakness. When it comes to the mind, you know the mind, you conquer the mind. You see a weakness in the mind, you can conquer it. That is how meditation will really help a person. And then here we are talking of rising above the gunas, triguna. You have to transcend the gunas. So meditation, it eliminates tamas, Meditation, it eliminates tamas, tamoguna. So in meditation, in the thoughtless state you remain. So that awareful being is same as alertness, which is the opposite of tamoguna. So sattvaguna is the opposite of tamoguna. Sattvaguna is very close to that Atma, and so you remain alert and watchful. That is what meditation is. Remaining alert and watchful. That is sattvaguna, which neutralizes the tamoguna. And then meditation helps you to overcome rajoguna, that hyperactivity of the mind. You see, our minds are so hyperactive that we go crazy with the mind. So it puts us on such a roller coaster, and it doesn't allow us any peace of mind, and it pushes us in the samsara from one calamity to the other, all because of the mind, because of its hyperactivity, which is the rajoguna. And meditation helps you to overcome the rajoguna. Therefore, becoming free from thoughts is meditation, and that will help you to pierce into the higher states of your own consciousness. There is a higher dimension in you. In you there is the physical dimension, which is the body, and then in you there is the psychological dimension, which is the mind. But then that is not the end of the story. There is a thing called Atma, which is a higher dimension, higher than physical and psychological. You are not just body and mind alone. You are something which is beyond the body and the mind. And so that higher dimension, which is the Atma, which is the awareful being, meditation will help you to pierce these superficial dimensions of physical and psychological and arrive at the deeper dimension. Deeper or higher? Just a language, Deeper means don't think that some physical deeper. You have to take the spirit of what is being said. So the deeper dimension of the awareful being, that is what you will arrive at by meditation. So I will be saying a few other things about meditation in due course of time. Tatropaya sahasranam ayam bhagavatoditaha yadishvare bhagavati yatha yairanjasaratihi. You see, in this world, to overcome the bondage of gunas and karma, that is what we are looking at. Gunas and karma, they bind us, and they are not our swarupa. But because of identification, we become bound in gunas and karma. You are bound by karma as you identify with the karma by becoming a karta. You are bound by gunas as you identify with the body and the mind. So body is the tamoguna, mind is the rajoguna. So that is how you get bound by the gunas. Now the way out from this bondage is disidentification with the gunas. So how to do that? So meditation. Yogaha pravaho paramo dhiyaha. That is one. Then he is recommending, you cannot do meditation whole day. I was asking you to do 5 minutes, 7 minutes, like that 12 minutes. So the rest of the day you will not do meditation. Need not do also. Meditation is enough. The way I suggested, if you do that much, that is more than enough. 30 minutes meditation, we conduct a session of 30 minutes. In that, you remain thoughtless only for 10 minutes. The remaining 20 minutes is all preparation, watching the body, watching the mind, all such things. The real silence of mind will be less than 10 minutes only. So, that is the preparation for meditation. So it has its own value. So that way you can do the 30 minutes session also. But even you can practice this, just remain silent inwardly 5 minutes, 10 days, and see what happens. Therefore, meditation is important. Then he is suggesting there are many methods presented in the Puranas, in the scriptures. Any number of methods are there. In fact, he says upaya sahasranam. Thousands of upayas are being recommended. Prahlada says, I recommend one upaya. That is bhaktihi, ratihi, ishvare ratihi. The devotion, ratihi is love. Love is bhakti. When it comes to Ishvara, love means bhakti. So that love for Ishvara, which is the bhakti, and this I recommend, because nothing is as simple and as great as the bhakti. There may be thousands of other upayas, but this is the best. So that is bhakti. Now what is bhakti? So, you see, people have some kind of a mixed kind of notion about bhakti. So mostly bhakti is understood as a performance of a set of rituals, or visiting temples, or going on pilgrimage, or doing some charity here and there. So this is the essence of bhakti as it is understood by people. But you see, all these are actions. They are karma, not bhakti. Action is a physical dimension. It's an outer dimension. Whereas bhakti is love. That is an inner dimension. It is not as gross as doing a physical action. But it could be the spirit behind the action. That could be bhakti. Therefore, he is performing a ritual, but he is doing it with all love, with all bhakti. Then what is bhakti now? It is not the action itself. It is the spirit behind the action. Therefore, you have to understand bhakti in a very subtle way. That it's a very subtle thing it is. You should not confuse it with outer actions and outer appearances. Suppose I put namam. So putting namam is bhakti. No, that is not the correct thing. Putting namam is a physical action. And the spirit behind it, if there is some such spirit, that will be bhakti. You see, the bhakti as we describe in Vedanta is of a different dimension altogether. It is the inner dimension. It is not the physical dimension. So I present it in a few ways. Like, while performing an action, you understand that the phala, karma phala has to be given up. So you have to surrender karma phala to Ishvara and perform the action. Karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So you do that. So you perform, then all kamya karmas, the desire-inspired karmas are out. Because you have to give up the phala. You cannot do it for the sake of phala. Therefore it is not kamya karma anymore. It is a duty-based action. So it is nitya karma, kartavya karma, which is dutiful duty. And therefore you perform the duty. And so without being greedy about the results thereof. That spirit which makes you perform such actions is bhakti. That is how bhakti begins. And then as you are performing the duty, you be a witness to the performance. There is the doing, but I am not the doer. The doing happens. So by the power of Ishvara, as it reflects in this body-mind, so it is the power of Ishvara that makes the mind functional. The mind is able to think, and all action originates from the thought. And the thought is energy, thought is power, and that power has its source in Ishvara, the universal power, cosmic power. And then the eyes are able to see. That is again the blessing of the cosmic power. And the body is able to function, hands, legs, etc. Therefore, it is the prana shakti the cosmic power which makes the actions possible, whereas I am just a witness, I am not the real doer. And you recognize this truth, and being conscious of the truth, you allow the duty to happen. That kind of action performed without the sense of doership, that is bhakti. Bhakti is a very big thing, it is. And in bhakti, there is a perfect understanding of the truth. Then only you can have real bhakti. Then to make bhakti possible in our lives, I will tell you one or two things. Suppose something happens, you get sukha or dukkha. Whether you get sukha or dukkha, it is indeed understood as the result of karma phala. I tell you, suppose you get some nose is blocked and therefore some small inconvenience. That is karma phala. Now somebody gives some inhaler, Vicks inhaler. You inhale and the inconvenience is gone. The block is gone. That is also karma phala. In life, every aspect of sukha or dukkha is understood as karma phala. Everything is karma phala. Small sukha, small dukkha, they are karma phala. Big sukha, big dukkha are also karma phala. Medium sukha, medium dukkha are also karma phala. Every sukha and dukkha is karma phala. Okay? And then karma phala data is Ishvara. So Ishvara is the one who dispenses karma phala. And therefore, whether I get sukha or dukkha, it is given to me by Ishvara. And therefore I accept it. I do not comply. Sukha comes, I receive it with gratitude. Dukkha comes, I accept that also, because karma phala data is Ishvara. That is how Ishvara is understood. So as you understand Ishvara correctly as the karma phala data, and as a direct consequence of that understanding, receive sukha and dukkha with equanimity of mind. With equanimity, that is bhakti. Practical way of looking at bhakti. And then there is a personal will, jiva's ichha, jivecha, my own will. And then there is a cosmic will. So which puts the cosmic powers in place, like bhishasmat, vatah pavate, the wind blows, or it breezes by the power of Ishvara. The rivers flow by the power of Ishvara. The sun, the moon, the fire, they illuminate this creation. That is the power of Ishvara. So that is the cosmic will. And here I am sitting, a person, and I will a few things. I for example, I take breakfast. That is my will. And there is the cosmic will. Now, in bhakti, you recognize the cosmic will all the time. Never be forgetful of the cosmic will. That is bhakti. So there is the cosmic will. Suppose you see forest, that is the will of Ishvara. It is the glory of vibhuti of Ishvara. You see the sun, the moon, the seasons, the rain, the rivers, the mountains. All of this is the vibhuti of Ishvara. And all these elements are the power of Ishvara. And you are ever conscious of that fact. So generally, people are carried away by the names and forms, the variety of the names and forms. And so the variety of names and forms leads to attachment and aversion. We are attached to a few names and forms, and we are averse to a different set of names and forms. So this is how we are permanently caught in the opposites of the world. In the process, we lose sight of the glory of Ishvara that is manifest in the entire creation all the time. Therefore, in bhakti, you rise above these opposites. You are not caught up in the opposites of the world, sukha, dukkha, etc., good, evil, etc. These opposites are always there. You are not caught up in that. You rise above them. And then you become conscious of Ishvara Vibhuti, the glory of Ishvara everywhere, in everything, at all times. So you are conscious of that glory. And then coming to one's own life, there is this cosmic will operating in this life. And then there is my will operating in this life. And true devotion, bhakti, is that love for Ishvara. So much so, I never put my personal will against Ishvara's will. Ishvara's will is supreme. And if I notice that my personal will is pitted against Ishvara's will, then I surrender my personal will to Ishvara's will. That is called Sharanagati. So if I have to live 70 years by Ishvara's will, that is what I will accept. I don't want to live 1 year more. If I have to have this much comfort by Ishvara's will, I accept it. I don't want a wee bit of comfort more than that. My personal will versus Ishvara's will. If both coincide, wonderful. Nothing can be better than that. But for some reason, my will is in one direction, Ishvara's will is in the opposite direction. Immediately I withdraw my will and surrender it to Ishvara's will. That is bhakti. Therefore, so one has to understand the glory of bhakti. And in that understanding, the entire life gains a new direction altogether, that bhakti. So this kind of devotion to Ishvara, in a very practical sense of life, is the best way to rise above the bondage of gunas and karmas. That is what he says. Guru Shushrooshaya Bhaktya Sarvalabdharpanena Cha Sangena Sadhu Bhaktanam Ishvararadhanena Cha. So, then to acquire that bhakti, he is suggesting a few methods how to acquire it. He is addressing these Asura Balakas. Asura Balakas means they are ignorant because they are kids, they are ignorant. Balaka means ignorant. And then they are Asura means they are given to a life of worldly pleasures. That is called Asura. So, in a sense, we just fit the bill. We are the Asura Balakas. And so the Upadesha is for us. So one has to look at it like that. You see, people ask all kind of questions. Why Arjuna did this, Krishna did that, why Krishna said like this to Arjuna, why Arjuna followed it or did not follow it. Like that they analyze the Krishna and Arjuna, keeping them at a distance in place and time. So that is not the way to understand. Arjuna is yourself. And the Upadesha is for you, coming from Ishvara. One has to look at it like that. I have to put myself in the place of Arjuna. Should not be caught in the story details all the time. So, one person asked me, after listening to Gita, did Arjuna get self-realization or not? Then I told him, did you listen to Gita? Yes, I have listened. What happened to you? That is important, not about Arjuna. Arjuna, what Arjuna? Where is Arjuna? You are the Arjuna. You tell me what happened to you. So anyway, these are the Asura Balakas. Therefore, very pertinent Upadesha. He says, Bhaktya Guru Shushrushaya. That is one Upadesha. You may adopt it in your life. What is that? You do Shushrushya to the teacher with love. Bhaktya Guru Shushrushaya. In the verse, the words are reorganized like that. With love you do Shushrushya to the Guru. You see, the topic has come, therefore I am telling a few things. The word Shushrushya, you have to correctly understand. What is Shushrushya? Shrotum Ichha Shushrushya. Those who know Sanskrit can get it easily. The love to listen to the Shastra, that is called Shushrushya. Therefore, what is Guru Shushrushya? You go to the Guru and then you express your love to listen to the Shastra, and he teaches the Shastra and you listen to that. That is called Guru Shushrushya. But what is the meaning of this service to the Guru? That is Lakshana. You see, the word has a primary meaning which is called Abhidha and an implied meaning which is called Lakshana. Therefore, listening to the Shastra from the Guru is Guru Shushrushya, primary meaning. And the implied meaning is doing some service to the Guru. How the implication came? I tell you an example. You see, I went to a teacher. He was a great Vyakarana scholar. I expressed my desire to study Vyakarana with him. He told me, I appreciate your love for Vyakaranam and I can teach it to you, no doubt about it. You are a good student, I will teach you. But I have a problem. The problem is I don't have time. Because there are already half a dozen students at different levels and I have to take 3 classes, 4 classes daily to them, and now no time is left. Then I gave a thought to it and I told him, you have a cow. Yes, I have a cow. I noticed that you do some work related to cow, like bringing the fodder, by cutting the fodder and bringing, and then cleaning the place of the cow. And then his wife used to milk. So the rest of the job he used to do, milking she used to do. So from today onwards, that service to the cow I will do. And Amma will milk the cow and you become free. That liberates some time for you. And then like that, another thing also I suggested. I noticed you doing these small little chores. I will do them for you. He said, okay, if you do those 2 things, I will not have any problem in giving 1 hour's class to you. So this is how it happened for 4 or 5 years, and I studied Vyakaranam with him. Just I gave you an example. This is called Guru Shushrushya. Therefore, you do some service to the Guru and he will do the teaching. And that is the Guru Shushrushya. And that service you do with love. Love should be there, you know. Instead of doing it mechanically, you should do it with love. So, this is Guru Shushrushya. So, the word Guru Shushrushya should not be misconstrued that so you have to do physical service to the Guru, whether you learn anything or not, whether he teaches anything or not, the service is being done. It should not be construed like that. In fact, the whole thing should not be converted into what is known as Guru-dam. There is a thing called Guru-dam. The Guru exploits the Shishya and the Shishya exploits the Guru. It is called mutual exploitation. So, that is not Guru Shushrushya. So, the Guru Shushrushya should not degenerate into that, because that leads to various other problems. And the teaching takes a back seat. It should not happen in the name of Guru Shushrushya. The word Guru Shushrushya should be appreciated correctly. Then Sarva Labdharpanena cha. You see, I knew a gentleman. Whatever money he gets, he puts it before Ishvara. So I surrender all this money to Ishvara. And then he takes from there. And now he is the trustee to that money. It is not his money, it is Ishvara's money. He is only a trustee, and he uses that money very cautiously and judiciously. He doesn't waste any of that money. He doesn't use any of that money for his personal use. He just treats the whole thing as a trust, and he is the trustee. It is Ishvara's money. That is the way we have to deal with money in our lives. That is the real devotion. Therefore, you need not be ambitious about making more money. That is not Vedanta. You need not be competitive. In fact, one should not compare with others. There is no need to compare with others. If somebody else has more money, God bless him. This is what I have, and I am contented with that. For some reason, I need some more money. Okay, go ahead and make it by all means. But contentment and a non-comparison, non-competition, absence of ambition, these are the defining characteristics of a student of Vedanta. Very important. So that is how, and whatever wealth we have, that is not our wealth. There is nothing like my wealth. There is only wealth. And that wealth belongs to Ishvara, as every other wealth. All wealth belongs to Ishvara. Therefore, sarvalabdha arpanena cha. What all I get, I hand over to Ishvara, I surrender to Ishvara. You see, they tell a story about it. You must have heard. There used to be a devotee. So, at the end of the day, whatever money in the form of coins, it used to be in the form of coins, the money, whatever money he gets, so he used to draw a circle and throw the money up. And whatever falls within the circle is his money. And whatever falls outside the circle is not his money. He won't use it for himself. Whatever falls within the circle only he uses for himself. And the circle is also very small, not very big. That is how he was practicing his devotion. Then there is another guy. He says, he throws the money off, no circle is drawn. He said, whatever remains up is Ishvara's, and whatever falls down is mine. That is what he says. So, this is I remember this. So this is a very clever way of doing things. So it should not be that way. Sarva labdha arpanena cha. Whatever I have, I surrender it to Ishvara. Then sangena sadhu bhaktanam. You see, sangha means companionship. That is sangha. We should not have any companionship in life except the satsanga. That is the only sangha we are supposed to have. You should not have any other sangha. Like some club will be there, some recreation club. So become a member of that. Why? Because there are so many other people, I can become friend with them. Then Facebook community, you become part of that. So they will be talking so many things, you will be replying to them, you will be talking and they will be replying to them. What is that? So, how the mind gets distracted in multiple ways. So you don't need such a sangha. Unless it is satsanga. On Facebook, if it is satsanga, God bless you, do that. It must be satsanga. At all times satsanga. Only satsanga. Other times, maunam, silent. And if you have to speak in the line of duty, you speak. Duty, you speak. Satsanga, part of satsanga, you speak. Rest of the time, maunam. So that is how you develop companionship with the sadhu, means good people, Mahatmas, and then Bhakta, devotees. So this is what is called Satsanga. So you have to cultivate Satsanga alone. Then Ishvararadhanena cha. So you worship Ishvara. If you have the habit of doing a ritual on a daily basis, Nitya Karma, like stand before the rising sun and make a prayer. So please continue that. Or you have the habit of lighting a lamp, offering a flower, please do that, continue to do that. Or if you have the practice of chanting a mantra, so please do that. These are all various methods of worshipping Ishvara. So you may continue with that. You need not add a few more like that, not necessary. Whatever you have, you focus on them and put your heart and mind into that and continue with that. Ishvararadhanena cha Shraddhaya tat kathayancha Kirtanair gunakarmanam Tatpadamburuhadhyanat Tallinge ksharhanadibhihi. You may want to have Shraddha, means love and enthusiasm. That is what Shraddha. You must be very enthusiastic in listening to the description of Ishvara, Tat Kathayam. Like Bhagavatam, some story is being told. It describes the glory of Ishvara. Like for example, 10 minutes back, I was telling about the glory of Ishvara that is present all around you, the mountains, the rivers, etc. They are all glory of Ishvara. Like that, there is always a description about the glory of Ishvara coming from the Mahatmas, and you may want to listen to that, Shravanam. So then, Atma Vidya, that is Vedanta, it is glory of Ishvara only. In Vedanta, we describe the glory of Atma, which is none other than Ishvara. Therefore, you would certainly want to listen to any Vedanta discourse. Except these things like Vedanta and Bhakti, Jnanam and Bhakti, such discourse you may want to listen to. Other than that, discourses which are very worldly or which are meant for some kind of entertainment, you need not waste your time with all that. You have to submit yourself to this much only, because the time that we have must be used very appropriately, because we do not have so much time that you can waste time. You cannot afford to waste time. Therefore, you have to use time very cautiously. So such a Shravanam you should do. Then you may want to chant the glory of Ishvara through a mantra or through a nama, kirtanaihi gunakarmanam. Or you can study a Purana where the glory of Ishvara is described. So these things also will be very helpful. And then tat padamburuhadhyanat, you contemplate upon the lotus feet of Ishvara. Here again, the spirit of it is very useful. Generally, we talk about the feet of Ishvara, lotus feet of Ishvara. What do you mean by feet? So, you may as well visualize Ishvara as an individual with a human shape standing there and contemplate on the feet. You may do that. That is the very gross way of contemplating. Sthula, because you are contemplating on a physical form, therefore the contemplation belongs to the category of gross, because that is what you are contemplating about. But you can add the spirit associated with the feet. Feet of Ishvara, the spirit of that is Sharanagati. Wherever you hear the word feet of Ishvara, that means Sharanagati. The spirit of Sharanagati is symbolized by the feet. So, you may not convert this feet idea into a mechanical thing. Some people, what they do, so they take the picture of the feet in a very highlighted. The feet alone are highlighted in a bigger dimension. And so then make a frame and keep it there and offer flowers. Or you see, when you do that, then there will be no Sharanagati in it. It becomes very mechanical. Once you offer a puja, then immediately after that you wash off your hands. That is how it works out. So now people have a guru. So for their concept of guru, in India we see it all the time. Their concept of guru is, so the photo of the guru's feet is taken and it is made into a big frame and a daily puja is offered to that. Or they make feet with silver or even gold and then take it to the guru and make him put his feet into it for one time. He should have refused it in the very beginning itself. This is not the way to do. But he doesn't refuse. He goes along with it, and so he puts his feet there for a few seconds. And then he takes away his feet, and then you bring them home and to put in the bag and bring them home. And put there and daily offer flower and do puja. So now you have done what all you need to do about Guru. And wash off the hands. That is not the way. That is not pada abhimannan. That is not pada. Pada is not, you should not convert everything into such mechanical devices. It should not become such mechanical, because once it becomes mechanical, it soon becomes repetitive and no spirit is in it. And I tell you one more thing. When you become mechanical and repetitive, the mind becomes very dull. You may be very intelligent and very understanding, etc. in the worldly things, but when it comes to spiritual thing, the mind becomes very dull. Anything that you do mechanical and repetitive way makes the mind dull. Once the mind becomes dull, you will not know the truth. Because you need all creativity of the mind to know the truth. The Namarupa appear before you, you have to recognize that the Namarupa is unreal. And the truth is not having a name and not having a shape. And you have to know that truth. So you can imagine how creative the mind must be. Therefore, you should perseveringly avoid all mechanical and repetitive kind of activity. So you should do it with love and with devotion, with the proper spirit. Therefore, coming back to the point, so feet, contemplating upon the feet means you contemplate about surrendering yourself to Ishvara, Sharanagati. There is a contemplation of Sharanagati. There is a meditation. So you have to do such meditation. Need not be at the time of sitting in the meditation class only, or need not be in the morning alone. Whenever the thing comes to the mind of surrendering to Ishvara, particularly so when you face some adversity, or you face some dishonor, somebody doesn't honor you properly, or you face some discomfort, or even some calamity in life. In all such adverse situations, you should remember the Sharanagati, and so I have surrendered myself to Ishvara. Now this calamity or this adversity or this negative thing that I am facing, so I accept it. That is the meaning of Sharanagati. And there are a few other things about Sharanagati. So acceptance is this main spirit of Sharanagati. Sharanagati means surrender. Once you surrender, you accept what you get from Ishvara. That is called surrender. Generally, in life, what people do, they go to Guru. Oh Guruji, I am surrendering myself unto you. And then they put demands before the Guru. Now, if you are putting demands, then there can be no surrender. And if you surrender, then there will be no demand. Either demand or surrender. You cannot combine the two, because they are mutually exclusive. Therefore, you surrender to Ishvara. Now, from your side, the all agenda is given up. No agenda from your side. And whatever may be Ishvara's agenda for you is welcome. Means acceptance. So everything should be converted into the spirit. Everything mechanical should be converted, physical should be converted into the spirit. You should move from the physical to the spiritual, from the gross to the subtle. That must be the movement. Tallinge ksharhanadibhihi. So you look at Ishvara's form. Means you go to a temple. Suppose you go to a temple. And it could be Ishvara Linga. Means need not be a temple. Suppose you are looking at the rising sun. So the rising sun is a linga for Ishvara. Linga is the indicator, like a mark. Like you see smoke rising from the mountain peak. You see the smoke. So the smoke is a linga for what? Fire. Smoke is the linga for fire. Similarly, the sun is rising. So sun is the linga for Ishvara. That's why the rishis, they used to stand before the rising sun and pray. Gayatri mantra has come like that only. That is one such prayer. Similarly, various other mantras about sun, they are all prayers before the rising sun. They are not sun worshippers. They are worshipping Ishvara only. But then why sun? Sun is the mark that indicates Ishvara. Is the mark, linga. So you stand before the sun and with amazement and wonder and love. These are the defining characteristics of bhakti. What amazement. Suppose you don't get any amazement, that means you have converted into mechanical. You have become mechanical. You should not become mechanical. Any time and every time you look at the sun, you look at the moon, or you look at Dakshinamurti, or you look at Sri Krishna, any time and every time. Dakshinamurti or Sri Krishna in a temple, sun and moon in the horizon, or in the sky. Any time you look at these lingas, every time you look at these lingas, there must be the freshness of the present moment. And then only there is a wonder. Sun can be a great wonder if only you know how to wonder. And moon is equally amazing. Sri Krishna's form is a wondrous form, the most amazing form it is. So like that, you should cultivate that wonder, that amazement, and that love for that linga. Whenever you look at, that is how you have to cultivate. This is the way you have to visit a temple. Otherwise, it becomes mechanical. Suppose you say, I have visited Kashi 5 times. That means you have converted into mechanical. It has become very mechanical now. And therefore, you feel the higher the number, more the visits, more the punya that you get. Which may be true also. You may be getting punya, but your bhakti remains where it is. It doesn't progress. Punya is different, inner growth is different. Therefore, the visit to the temple must be very fresh, very amazing, the feeling of amazement and the feeling of love as you look at the form. That should be there. This is the way one has to visit the temple. So this is how these qualities have to be cultivated. We will come back. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate